I am the president of Stock Roar State Bank. I also serve as the mayor of Ashland. I've been in that capacity for a number of years, and that's just what we do here. We get involved in our communities and we serve to help others. You know, Ashland, Englewood in this area is home. It's home to myself. I grew up with 15 miles of Ashland, and it's a special place. We are about 2,200 in the county, 850 approximately here in Ashland.
My name's Dr. John Kellenberger. I'm a veterinarian. I've lived in the Ashland area since May of 1996. My wife and I moved here straight out of vet school. I am a veterinarian at Ashland Veterinary Center, part owner of the practice. The Ashland-Englewood area is much different than a lot of Southwest Kansas in the sense that it is almost solely driven off of the cattle industry. There's not a part of the community or nobody in the community, whether you work at the grocery store or you work at the quick shop or the vet clinic or the bank, that isn't directly influenced by the cattle industry.
My name is Greg Gardner. I am a fourth generation rancher here. Our family came to this area of the United States and this portion of Kansas in 1885. My father was born in 1931, which his name was Henry, and he continued to build the ranch, and along with my other two brothers, Mark and Garth, we were the fourth generation here to operate, and so now we're very fortunate in our business to have the fifth generation coming back with Mark's two older sons and my son Grant.
So I'm Grant Gardner, Greg's son. First home from the fifth generation. Started working here full-time in 2013 after graduating from Kansas State University. Day-to-day operations are kind of varied as far as what I am responsible for, but there's plenty to keep us busy. So on March 6th, it was a day, sound cliche, started out, like about any other. The wind was excessively high that day.
Started off as a normal day for me of work, and strangely enough, the first call I went on that day, I was leaving a ranch that I was probably within about 8 miles of where the fire started. At
that time, I was there at the house. My wife was actually at home that day, and there was a big dark cloud off to the west. No one really knew where the fire was. Well, I could tell that it was off to the southwest. I thought, well, it's off that direction. If I go this way, I can hopefully just get behind it and then it'll be fine. Well, unbeknownst to me and everyone at that point, it was much closer than anyone ever thought. I started trying to head this way, and they called an evacuation of Ashland, and my family evacuated to Coldwater.
About 3 o'clock that afternoon, as serving as mayor, I was called to the Emergency Operations Center. We set up here in town and knew that it was going to be time to evacuate Ashland. And we did that shortly thereafter and began the process of evacuating Ashland to, most everybody went to Coldwater.
Got the family there, and I was going to come home, and I couldn't get out of Coldwater. The dirt roads that I tried to come home on, power lines were down. They weren't letting anybody go on the highway. We got it to safety and rode it out there in the wheat field where the wheat was green. It wouldn't have caught fire, so waited for the smoke to pass, and then went to assess the damage to see how many we lost.
That afternoon, as it got closer to the ranch, I called my brother Mark, asked him, how can I help? He said, well, come with a trailer. We still have horses at our place. We're trying to get them loaded and get them out of there. Well, when I got to his place with the trailer, the fire was on top of us with a 60 to 100 foot flame wall. As the smoke rolled over us and the flames, I lost sight of my brother and sister-in-law. They ran into the house to try and save some things, and by this time, shortly after, the house was on fire. Ultimately, the good ending to the story, we did all make it out. There were several lives lost in the panhandle of Texas. Here in Kansas, there was a truck driver to the east of Ashland that drove into the fire and lost his life. But as a community, for as many close calls and close turns here or there, God had his hand on all of our lives that day.
So I actually did not make it home until about 4 a.m. In that time period, I'd been told 6 different times that our home burnt. And by the grace of God, it didn't. The fire actually burnt up to within about a foot of the east side of our house and about 6 foot of the south side. But you talk about why is Ashland home? And it's home because my friends were out there helping save my house when I couldn't be there.
I stayed at the operations center all night, serving as mayor and helping out in that capacity. But one of the things that we deal with in a small town is so many of us. I mean, you have a bank to run, I mean, being the president of the bank as well, and to be concerned about our people here, but then your family at home. My family did evacuate to Coldwater, but we had 2 bankers that are EMTs, one that's a volunteer fireman. We have about 4 of them that are impacted directly or indirectly by the fire. So we, all of our friends and neighbors, were definitely involved in the fire in one way, shape, or form, and you just can't escape it. I mean, the size and the scope of it is hard to describe. I mean, when it burnt so much of our county, about everything except the far northwest corner, I mean, it's just hard to describe how Ashland is still standing, but nevertheless it is. In the days that followed, there wasn't a person one that just stopped for a handout. It was just roll up your sleeves and get to work, and thank God that we were alive, and that's what we could do, is get to work.
Well, you know, for the days and weeks after the fire, unfortunately, our focus as veterinarians totally changed. We spend our life making animals productive and live. And unfortunately, for the first week, my life was putting animals to sleep. And it was obvious those needed to be done. You know, they were severely injured. They were to where they couldn't get up. But as the days progressed, we started to get into those cattle that were showing symptoms. There is no doubt these animals were going to be non-productive animals. The main concern was welfare. There was going to be a lot of suffering, and the intended purpose of these animals, they were not going to be able to fulfill that. So as we started to sort through these animals, we quickly found out through the government program that we had 2 options. Animals that may have been sent to an emergency slaughter facility, based on our judgment as professional veterinarians that they could do that and be productive into the food chain. Those animals were going to be worth about $500. And if they were deemed to need to be put to sleep, they were worth just over $1,000 through the government program. And that was extremely challenging for these people, who, some of which have lost their home. If they were fortunate enough to have their home, they've lost, you know, everything else they had. So, you know, kind of in review and in closing of what we've discussed is, we're talking specifically about the Livestock Indemnity Program. I referred to the LIP, and that's what that is. And in my opinion, we really need to reword the LIP so that there is not a financial advantage to euthanize animals.
One of the unique situations of our operation, we're unique to the industry and the sector and the seed stock sector that we operate in.
Without getting muddled into details, our animals that we produce are high quality genetics, high valued cattle that are created to add value to other producers' herds as they incorporate them into their herd, their breeding programs. So these cattle are the elite of the breed.
To operate in that magnitude, we are asset rich and cash poor as this event has brought to fruition, which we always have known that. And a lot of the things to rebuild our infrastructure is with after-tax dollars.
That said, the cattle that we had turned out that were lost, they were carrying calves, had calves at side. We lost approximately 600 cattle. The Livestock Indemnity program, which is in place to help in extreme cases like this, death loss, catastrophes, help recover some of those funds, those asset dollar amounts lost, caps out at $125,000.
Then sequestered back down for the first $9,000 right off the top. We received $116,000, and that was, we were grateful for that.
So let's be conservative and say that the average animal out here is going to sell for $3,000. Well, that really doesn't go that far when you lose 600 head.
We literally lost millions of dollars worth of livestock and cattle. With the programs that we became aware of after this catastrophe, we were grateful for them, but many of them are somewhat cumbersome. But the legislation that they introduce, hopefully in the future, that maybe can address some of these issues, will help the generations of folks and youngsters that come back and try to make a living in production agriculture. There are so few of us involved, less than 1% people in the United States are involved in this way of life, and yet we're being asked to feed the rest of the world. And so our job and opportunity to help take care of the world is to feed God's people. And so at times when some of these events happen, we need some help. And so hopefully for in the future that can be addressed.
As a result of the fire, as I mentioned, there's so much grassland in this area. It's not the first fire we've ever had. It's not going to be the last either. When you have so many miles of fence, roughly just over 4,000 miles of fence destroyed in our county alone, that's a lot of fence. And at $10,000 a mile, that adds up to a big number, $40 million in a hurry. And how we as a bank work with our customers, but also work with the programs that are available. And the Emergency Conservation Program is a good program, but the word emergency, it takes a while to get that repayment back. And when oftentimes your collateral is gone, how these guys can borrow money to get from point A to point B to get that fence rebuilt. And it would be a great help if we could get some of that money up front, or a good portion of that money up front instead of a year or two later once the fence is complete. And then the other, don't do this for us. We're going to get through this because of the support of so many, but this, like I said, it's not going to be the last fire that's ever faced, whether it's in Kansas, Texas, Oklahoma, or Montana. It's just part of what we are. We have been supported by so many. But these programs are important, and they're extremely important, and it's huge for these producers to be able to get the assistance. I think they need it sooner rather than later. So if you could amend it to get that emergency part, and maybe it's just on the fencing portion of it, get that immediately based on turning your application in.